Good day, I'm Jose Diaz-Villar. We are coming on the air with the president reacting to some breaking news that 2 U.S. soldiers and an American civilian interpreter have been killed in Syria. The president just moments ago speaking at the White House. Let's bring you those comments now.
So we mourn the loss of 3 great patriots in Syria. You know how it happened. There was an ambush, terrible. We also have 3 wounded. They seem to be doing pretty well. But we mourn the loss. These are 3 great people. And just a terrible thing. Syria, by the way, was fighting along with us. The new president of Syria is, as they told me, and I'm not surprised, he's devastated by what happened. This was an ISIS attack on us and Syria. And again, we mourn the loss, and we pray for them and their parents and their loved ones. Very, very sad.
Mr. President, will the U.S. retaliate against ISIS?
Yeah.
And will U.S. forces attack again?
You're going to be seen.
And should the U.S. still be?
We will retaliate. Thank you very much.
President Trump just moments ago, as he is leaving the White House to board Marine One, that helicopter there. You see, I want to bring in NBC News international correspondent Raf Sanchez. Raf, what do we know about this incident in Palmyra, Syria?
Yeah, Jose, that's right. So this took place in the city of Palmyra. It's a desert city in the center of the country. It's known for its Roman ruins. And according to the Pentagon, this American unit was taking part in what's called a key leader meeting. We don't know exactly who it was they were meeting, but potentially either a local government official or some kind of tribal leader. Central Command is saying they were then ambushed by what they are calling a lone ISIS gunman. They're saying the gunman was killed in a return of fire. We don't know at this point what it is that makes the Pentagon so confident that this gunman was in fact a member of ISIS, but we may learn more to come. As you said, those 2 troops and 1 civilian interpreter were killed in that attack. The Pentagon says that they will not be releasing the names for another 24 hours, which is the standard notice period while they contact the families of these Americans who were killed. Now, Jose, there have been American troops inside Syria since the Obama administration. They've been there fighting against ISIS. They've been working closely with the U.S.'s Kurdish-led allies inside of Syria. But the context inside of Syria has, of course, completely changed over the last year following the fall of Bashar al-Assad, the longtime dictator, and his replacement by this new Syrian government, the one the president was referring to there. Just last month, this astonishing scene of the new president of Syria, a man who was once an al-Qaeda leader, in the Oval Office, being welcomed by President Trump. His name is Ahmed al-Shara. He says that he has changed, that he is committed to a pluralistic, non-sectarian Syria. And crucially, Jose, he committed his government to join the anti-ISIS coalition led by the United States. So for the first time in the long presence of American forces inside Syria, they are now directly cooperating with the Syrian government, with the Syrian military. And Jose, it is very notable. The Syrian Interior Ministry is saying that they issued a warning to U.S. forces that there was a threat from ISIS in Palmyra. And according to the Syrian Interior Ministry, they are saying that warning was not taken seriously by U.S. troops on the grounds. Now, we do not have details about how specific this warning was. We haven't heard yet from the Pentagon about their understanding of what was said, but that may be a key question in the days going forward, whether there was some kind of information that was either ignored or not taken seriously. You heard the president there saying that he will retaliate against ISIS. ISIS, of course, has lost its territorial caliphate. It no longer controls large swathes of territory the way it did 10 years ago. But there are still pockets of ISIS fighters across Syria. There may be places where the U.S. has intelligence that they are gathering, and it may be those kind of areas that it strikes in retaliation. But this is a reminder that while ISIS has lost its territory, it remains a danger inside Syria and beyond. Jose.
An important and dangerous reminder, Raf, to all of us as to the threats and the dangers that American men and women of the United States Armed Forces face in specifically where we're talking about Syria, whereas you bring up there have been some American presence there for more than 10 years now. But, Raf, do we know anything about how or if there have been any changes to American involvement in Syria since the change of the dictatorship there? Hafez al-Assad now in Moscow and a new leadership, a new country in many ways. Have there been changes to how the Americans operate inside Syria as a consequence of those changes?
Yeah, Jose, that is a really, really key question. I have spent time inside Syria, up in the northeast of the country, largely controlled by the Kurds, and the Americans operated very openly there for a long time. You would be driving along these rural roads, and all of a sudden you would just see a column of American Humvees with the stars and stripes coming in the other direction. So the U.S. was up in the northeast of the country. The U.S. was also in the south of Syria along the Jordanian border, and the idea there was not only to put pressure on ISIS forces there, but also to serve as a deterrent to Iran, which you'll remember was a close ally of the Assad regime. The Iranians were moving a lot of weapons through Syria to their other proxies in the region, including Hezbollah in neighboring Lebanon. So those were the two main areas where American forces were operating: the northeast of the country near the Iraqi border and the south of the country near the Jordanian border. The fact that American forces were in Palmyra is very notable because that is way outside of the traditional zones that the U.S. has operated. And that is a consequence of this new partnership with the Syrian government, that you have American forces deep, deep in the central deserts of Syria. Now, again, Jose, we simply do not know the details of what exactly they were doing there, but it is possible that this was less familiar territory for the United States than its bases in the south and in the northeast, which is an area it knows very well. And it's also possible that this is an area that is bringing U.S. troops in closer contact with population centers where you may have ISIS sleeper cells, as opposed to those more sparsely populated areas down in the south and those areas in the northeast which are controlled by traditional U.S. allies. You heard the president say that Ahmed al-Shara, the president of Syria, is devastated, in his words, at the loss of these U.S. troops. It does sound like there were some Syrian government forces who were at least injured, possibly killed in this attack. So this is potentially a situation where you have American troops and Syrian troops shoulder to shoulder being killed and injured in the same firefight, if you will. But as you say, this is a very different context, and you now have American forces operating in areas of the country that they did not previously. Jose.
Yes, and we have to wonder where the Alawites, if the Alawites at all, were in any part of the region where you're talking about. They were, of course, part of the al-Assad dictatorship group that was in power. Raf, thank you very much. I want to bring in NBC White House correspondent Yamiche Alcindor. Yamiche, I know that you were just in a gaggle. The president just left the White House. He mentioned not only the death of those two Army soldiers and that one civilian American interpreter, but also 3 wounded.
That's right. That's right, Jose. The president just spoke about this. He walked out on the White House lawn and he began by saying he's mourning with the families of the Americans that were injured in this attack and the Americans who were killed in this attack. He also vowed that the U.S. would retaliate against ISIS and against anyone that attacks Americans. The president also posted online, I want to read to you part of it and maybe show it to folks. He wrote, "We mourn the loss of these 3 great American patriots in Syria, 2 soldiers and 1 civilian interpreter. Likewise, we pray for the 3 injured soldiers who, It was just confirmed are doing well. He went on to say there will be a serious retaliation. I want to read to you a series of other statements that we've gotten from the administration. The Pentagon put out a statement that said this attack took place in an area where the Syrian president does not have control. Initial assessments show the attack was likely carried out by ISIS. Then you also had Secretary Pete Hegseth, who said the savage who perpetrated this attack was killed by partner forces. Let it be known, if you target Americans anywhere in the world, you will spend the rest of your brief, anxious life knowing the U.S. will hunt you down, find you, and ruthlessly kill you. We also had DOD spokesperson Sean Parnell. He put out a statement saying the soldiers' names, as well as identifying information about their units, are being withheld within 24 hours after the next of kin notification. Also saying that the attack occurred as soldiers were conducting a key leader engagement, and their mission was to support ongoing counter-ISIS and counter-terrorism operations in the region. So really, you're hearing a full-throated response from the Trump administration here, and you're also hearing the president himself say that he's personally mourning as these Americans are both being mourned as well as people being prayed for because of the wounded that he said are doing well, Jose.
Yemi Shalsendor at the White House, Ralph Sanchez in London. I thank you so very much for being with us today. We'll, of course, bring you any updates on this story right here on NBC News Now, online at NBCnews.com, and tonight on NBC Nightly News. I'm Jose Diaz-Balart. Now we return you to previously scheduled programming.
We thank you for watching, and remember, stay updated on breaking news and top stories on the NBC News app or watch live on our YouTube channel.